Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Wednesday night Bible study here at Faith Baptist Church's Facebook and YouTube Live. We're so glad to have you guys with us this evening. We're going to be continuing our series in the Hall of Faith, but before we get there, I want to remind everybody to be in prayer for one another. I don't have a whole lot of updates, but I'll give you what I have. Let's see. We're still praying for Wayne Robinson. Looks like he's going to be on some medication. And it's going to be a little rough going from here on. Ryan asked us to pray for her family as they travel, so be in prayer for them. We're still praying for Matt as he's graduated from boot camp and is on his way to being a full-fledged Marine. And we're very excited for him, but also kind of worried for him too, because that's not an easy job. Let's see, we're praying for Philip Underwood. We're praying for my Aunt Rhonda. Let's see, we're praying for Jeremiah in his process in beginning school and so forth, and just praying for a smooth school year for him especially. Other than that, let's see, we're praying for Bobby Reynolds, who found a cancerous lump. We're praying for the Dobbs family as they try to get their housing situation figured out. And all those hurricanes and all those tornadoes and stuff, their house was destroyed, and they're trying to wrestle with the insurance company. Rita Holbrook, we're praying for her. Get that situation figured out with her. We already mentioned Wayne. And, okay, Ryan says, pray for Shannon. She has an ear infection, and she's been out sick all week. My goodness. Yeah, so you guys be in prayer for Shannon as she tries to recover from that. If you guys who come on a regular basis, you know who Shannon is. And just be in prayer for her. And if you don't know who Shannon is, the Lord knows who Shannon is, and that's really all that matters. So when you say Shannon, he'll know who you're talking about. So just be in prayer for her as she gets to feeling better quickly. But that's all that I have for this evening. This Sunday, I want to remind you guys, it's Anniversary Sunday. So we got some special stuff we're trying to plan for Anniversary Sunday, and there's going to be food afterwards in traditional Baptist fashion. So we're looking forward to that as well. You guys come on through and celebrate with us 6 years of Faith Baptist Church ministering to the world, preaching the gospel, spreading the word of God, trying to be a blessing to the world around us. So you guys, I'll be sure to be praying for that. Looking forward to it, I hope. I want to thank you guys for liking the stream. You guys, I've seen that there was, I think, 4 last time I checked on YouTube that liked it, and I appreciate that. I also want to say that on YouTube, it won't tell us who likes specifically. So that's a privacy security issue. So we appreciate you, even though we don't necessarily know your names. Tonight, I want to thank Sylvia and Amanda for liking on Facebook, because it will tell me your names. Evidently, it doesn't care as much about your security. Amanda says, please pray for the Moore family as they travel and move to Montana this weekend. Yes, I did forget about that, so we're going to pray for the Moore family. I didn't know if I was supposed to mention that out loud or not.
Yeah, she's on that line.
Oh, okay. And yeah, see, everybody's all excited for Anniversary Sunday, super geared up for it. It's going to be a good time. So I think that's all that I have for right now. If you guys have something else you want to make mention of, you want me to make mention of, leave a comment, either whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. I should be able to see it. And if I see it, I'll try to mention it for everybody. Absolutely not interrupting, but tonight we're talking about our next Hall of Faither. So let's go ahead and jump over to our Bible study cam. And the Bible should pop up. I don't know why it's not popping up. Did I make it go away? That's not the Bible. Well, I don't know why now all of a sudden... Where'd my mouse go? Bruce, come on, man. Not now. Bruce is, by the way, if you don't know, the name of my computer. My mouse has completely disappeared.
I do that all day at school. So
I can't see my mouse anymore. I can see what it's highlighting. Okay, so you YouTubers have Bible, but you Facebookers don't, and I don't understand why. I think this is what I want. Hey, thank you so much for liking the stream, Ryan. I appreciate that. Properties. I thought it was supposed to be automatic. It is supposed to be automatic, and it's not doing it. Oh, no, I can't see where my mouse is. I have no idea where things are. Oh, no. Be patient with me. I will be able to get around this, but it's going to take me just a second. Aha. Hang on. I got to go back around the wheel. Yes. There we go. Okay. This is actually becoming a problem. This is kind of a problem. Okay. A little bit higher from there. Ha ha! Figured it out. Sorry if I scared you. Not sorry, though. Okay, we're just going to have to rock out like this. You know, my computer's been working fine all day, all week long. Then I go to stream the Bible, and now it is not working. Isn't that the way it goes? Boy, this is like playing that's not what I wanted. This reminds me of some very difficult video games I used to try to play. Nope, that's not what I wanted either. Okay. We're just going to have to do this. Okay. Okay. All right, so I think I'm ready to get started here. Why my mouse vanished into the ether, I don't know. But we're just going to... we're just going to go through that. All right, so if you saw the title of the video tonight, you know we're talking about Moses. So we talked about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And now we're moving on to Moses. Hebrews 11:23 says, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw that he was a proper child. And they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. And then we get to parts of his life that we're not going to talk about tonight, that we'll talk about in other lessons, probably next week. Keeping the Passover, the sprinkling of blood, passing through the Red Sea, so forth. All fantastic stories we're going to get into, but tonight we're going to be talking about this first bit of his life you can find in Exodus 2. And we are going to be going through that story in Exodus 2 when we get to it, but there's some really juicy stuff here we just read that I don't know if you noticed or not. Verse 23, he said, by faith, when he was born, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents. Now, if you know the story, you know that Egypt was trying to kill all the Hebrew boys. All of the Jewish young men, their lives were in danger. These babies' lives were in danger. And the Egyptian Pharaoh wanted them all killed. So if they knew that there was a male baby in the house, they would have had their soldiers come in and murder this baby. That's incredibly intense. But their parents could have done a lot of things. They could have moved away, perhaps. We don't know if that was an option for them. They were, after all, slaves in this land. But sometimes throughout history, slavery is not as intense as it was here in America. The most horrific version of that we find here in our own history. But, so that may have been an option for them, may not have been. We know also that they could have, given the child over to somebody who doesn't live somewhere else. They had some things they could have done, but they chose to keep the child. And they chose to hide the child for as long as they could. I'm sure, number one, because they loved their baby, but also it says here in verse 23, because they saw he was a proper child. Now, that doesn't mean they saw, wow, this is an actual child. I guess I'll keep a hold of it. No. And it doesn't mean that he was holding his pinky up as a baby while he was drinking tea either. This is a proper child, mate. Yes, indeed. It doesn't mean that either. It means he was a special child. There was something special about Moses that his parents could tell even back then. And, we all have something special about us. You hear people say that and you go, yeah, sure we do, whatever. But no, really, God has something unique for each and every one of us to add to his work, right? Maybe somebody's, really funny. They tell a lot of jokes. They light the room up. That's so important. You might not be able to, charge a group of soldiers into battle, but you can lighten a room up. That's so important, man. Sometimes that's even more important. Because you got to have that esteem, you got to have that energy, that enthusiasm. You got to be able to keep going. And people like that are important. Maybe you're a fantastic artist. Maybe you're a wonderful musician. Maybe you got a real crafty imagination. Whatever it is that you have, don't be envious of others. God will use that the same way he used Moses' special things to do some fantastic stuff as well. But they knew that God had something special planned for Moses, so they tried to keep him safe for as long as they could, but also it says they were not afraid of the king's commandment. They weren't afraid for their own lives, is what that means. Don't get it mixed up. They weren't like, no, what do I care? They find the baby, we did the best we could, right? That wasn't their attitude at all. They weren't afraid for their own lives. They said, we're going to protect this child as best we can, and if our lives are taken in the process by Pharaoh, then so be it. But we're going to do our very best to keep this child alive. So that's what they did. And we're going to see more detail of that when we get into Exodus 2. But here in verse 24, he says, when he was come to years, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. This was a very important thing for Moses. When he was come to years, when he was old enough to know the truth. This must have been an extremely heavy day for Moses. He was finally told by the woman he thought was his mother that he was found in a river, and that she took him because she was trying to save his life. Maybe it was his actual mother, who was a nurse to him his whole life, who finally sat him down and said, I am your mom. But no matter how he found out, there came a day where he found out and he chose. He said, I don't want the palace. I don't want the riches. I don't want all of these things, because if you've know somebody who's was raised in a rich household, you know that there's a temptation or disassociation there. A lot of dads who make sure that their family have all the money they want to do anything they could ever hope to want to do is a dad that's usually not home a lot. Or even mom and dad who's not home a lot. But the family who spends a lot of time together, that's a close family, and a lot of times they don't have as much money. I'm sure they do fine. We do fine, but sometimes you sacrifice that family for your work and for your bank account, and that's kind of what Moses was dealing with here. He was a wealthy family, Pharaoh, and important people, and not very close to him. But this woman, who was a slave woman who had raised him, found out this was my real mother. So he said, this is the woman that cares about me. This is the woman I want to associate with. I'm not interested in the power and the clout and the influence that comes with the house of Pharaoh. I want these people that know what love really is. And I want these people who know, I want to be associated with this woman who is a good woman. And these people who are a good people, this man who is a good man and is my real father. And I want to be associated with these people. He refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And that is such an important thing, because verse 25 tells us the decision he made. That is such a hard decision to make, but it's the one he made, and he was blessed for it. Because he said he was choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God. He's choosing to suffer affliction. Why? Because that affliction associates him with God and God's people. Because that affliction, it was everything. It was, I want to be on the side of right. And the side of right isn't necessarily winning, but that's the side I want to be on. I mean, anybody in that situation, when you don't know how the story ends, when you don't know what happens to Moses, you've never heard of what's the Red Sea? I've never even heard of that. When you've never even heard of the 10 Commandments, you've never heard of the 10 plagues, let my people go, you've never heard of the Passover. What is any of this? You have no idea. And all you know is there was this boy who could have been part of Pharaoh's family, and instead he said, no, I want to be a part of this slave family. You would call him an idiot. Anybody in the world would call this man a fool. You had the ability to be a part of this, and instead you choose to be a part of that? Who would do that? He chose to do that because it associated him with the side of right. And the results he didn't care about. He said, if something terrible happens to me, I don't care. I just want to be on the side of right. There's not enough of that anymore. There's not enough people interested in being righteous. There's not enough people in the world who look at a situation and say, there's a problem there, I want to help. And then they help out. A situation I can't give very many details about recently happened somewhere where a group of people had a leader that was giving them an extremely hard time. And to the point nearly of abuse, yelling and shouting and all kinds of things that he was being told to do. And he would take those things and he would throw them in the trash and say, baloney with that. I'm just going to do whatever I want to. And really gave this other group of people a very hard time, made life very difficult for them. And they finally said, okay, you got to go. And then so this person left. And there were 70 people called and said, hey, we need somebody to step up. We need somebody to step up to help this group of people out. Will you do it? And 70 people said, no, thank you. I can't go any more detail than that, but I can tell you this is a real life situation that I know of that has recently happened, like this week. How many of those people call themselves Christians, do you wonder? How many of those people knew there was a need, what was going on, was told what was going on, and was like, this is why we need you. We think you'll be a good fit. Will you help us out? And they said, sorry, I got better things to do. There are not enough people choosing to suffer affliction on behalf of God. It's hard, it's miserable, it's difficult. Well, yeah, it's going to be. In order to be right, sometimes it's going to be. If all you ever choose is the thing that benefits you the most, don't call yourself something associated with God, because you're not. If you choose to serve you, don't pretend like you serve God. If you know it's wrong to get a tattoo and you choose to get a tattoo anyways, you've done wrong. Now, if you have a tattoo and you believe there's nothing wrong with getting a tattoo, then hey, that's great. But if you know you've done something you're not supposed to, you say, I know I shouldn't go drinking, and you go drinking, then you know you've done something wrong. There are Christians out there who drink and that they believe with their whole heart. The Bible says there's nothing wrong with that. The Bible says, he that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. You've done something you know you shouldn't do. You're serving you. You're taking an opportunity to increase your bank account rather than this opportunity over here that could genuinely help people. That is not what a Christian does. You're going to make decisions based off of what helps you, and you don't care who else you hurt in the process. Please do not associate yourself with Christ out in the world, because it's enough. We got enough of that. We got enough pastors and preachers and Christians out there pretending to be Christians only when it benefits them. We got enough politicians pretending to be Christians just so they can get our vote. We've got enough of it, okay? There's enough. I hate election year. You asking what somebody believes in, you're just asking to be lied to. Please. You don't know what those people truly think or believe. You really don't. God can use anybody. We need some Christians that are going to choose to be on the side of righteousness and say, I'm not going to live this lifestyle. It's wrong. And I don't care how unpopular I become. And I don't care if this guy doesn't like me anymore, if this girl doesn't like me anymore. I don't care what it costs me. I'm going to live on the side of right. We don't have enough of that anymore. And it's because we're being corrupted and polluted by people who thought they could make a buck off the name of Jesus. There's a reason that when I preach, that when I teach the Bible, I do so from my living room. That these Bible studies are done with cameras that were given to us to help. By the way, thank you so much, Ryan. By microphones that were paid for by people who donated to the church. As I sit here in this chair in my living room, there's a reason we do this tonight, and we go through so much work on a Sunday. We move all of our furniture out on Sunday, put all these red chairs out, hang up the curtains. We transform this place into a church. If you're worried about coming to this place and visiting because you're worried you're going to be stepping into somebody's living room to have service, don't worry about that. We go to extreme lengths to make this feel like a church building. It may not look it on the outside, but once you walk into the inside, just like with Christianity, may not look like much on the outside, but when you walk into the inside, there's something special going on. Right? There's a reason we don't have our own building. There's a reason that it's taken us this long to save the amount of money we have, because doing things the right way isn't popular. All these other churches out here that have their own buildings and are doing things their way, they are only concerned with how much money they're bringing in. They're only concerned with how many people they have attending. I tell you, I've been to these fellowships. I've been to these fellowships for 10 years, been going to them for 10 years before I started this church. And I can tell you what they talk about. They'll have some preachers stand up there and preach. But when it's time for eating and all these preachers and holy men are sitting around talking to one another, there's not one verse of scripture ever mentioned. I promise you, I would bet my life on it. There is not one mention of prayer. There is not one mention of anything spiritual. All they talk about is, how's your church doing? How's the church business going? How many did you run on Sunday? Hey, we just bought this brand new van. Hey, we just added this extension onto our building. That is all they talk about. I can tell you from personal experience. Pastors in 2024 are not interested in the things of God. They are interested in the things of Bank of America. They're interested in the things of Chase Bank. They're interested in these things. They are not interested in the things of God. Fight me. I'll prove you wrong. They are not interested in the things of God. There is some suffering. There is some sacrifice that comes with doing things the right way sometimes. But I'm telling you right now, if you will do things the right way, God will eventually bless you. I don't know how, and I don't know when, and I don't know why, but I'm telling you right now, there will come a day where these church services are not going to be in a home. They're going to be in a building that we've built for the Lord. I am telling you right now, I believe that with every fiber of my being, with my whole heart. God blesses that. But I'm not looking for it. I'm perfectly content to do it this way for the rest of my life. Why? Because I don't need the money. I don't need the paycheck. I don't need all that stuff. All I need is to know I'm speaking the truth. And you know what it means when I have zero support? When the only person supporting this church is the Lord and its church members? It means I don't have to make you happy. It means I don't have to please the holy elite. There's not some Council of Baptists somewhere I've got to kiss up to. I can tell them they're wrong. They can't do anything to me. You know why? Because God is for us. Who is haughty enough to think they can be against us? There is some affliction with the people of God, but when you associate with the people of God, you really associate yourself with the people of God and do it right, there are blessings that come with that. But that's just half of what it says, right? It says to suffer affliction with the people of God, then to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. I'm not going to lie to you this morning. Hello, what time is it? It's the evening. It's almost nighttime. You can tell because I'm exhausted. I'm not going to lie to you this evening, okay? There is pleasure in sin. There is. And anybody who tells you there's not, or anybody who tells you there's more pleasure in serving God than there is in serving sin, they're just lying to you. They're baiting you, okay? The pleasures of sin are real and they're enticing for a reason. But let me get to the end of it before you click away, okay? Because we are going to make this thing better. Being unfaithful to your spouse has some pleasure to it. Stealing something that doesn't belong to you has some pleasure to it. Lying to get ahead at work, knowing it's going to cost somebody else your mistakes, has some pleasure to it. The high that you get from doing drugs has a lot of pleasure to it. But let me tell you the part that they won't tell you about. Let me tell you why it's not worth it. Let me tell you why Moses made a good choice, okay? Because the pleasures of sin are, what are the last three words of that verse? For a season. Just for a season, because unfaithfulness gets caught. It gets found out. And these unfaithful men and unfaithful women, when they are unfaithful, they get caught. And now nobody wants anything to do with them. The woman they were cheating with finds out that they were actually married. I don't want anything to do with them anymore. And the wife who finds out that she was cheated on, I don't want anything to do with them anymore. And now nobody wants you. The pleasures of sin are just for a season. You steal that thing from that store, and you thought you got away with it when you didn't realize there were security cameras up, and they got your face, and they handed it over to the police, or they handed it over to the courts, and the next thing you know, you're getting a summons in the mail, or there's a police officer at your front door. Pleasures of sin are only for a season, right? And you lie at work to get ahead, and somebody else gets caught for it, but they check the stamps on those documents, and they see which computer it came from, and they found out that you lied, and actually you're the one that made the mistake. And now not only are you in trouble at work, you got to write up, you lost that demotion, and now nobody's looking to you to do anything anymore, and you're stuck where you are for the rest of your career. Pleasures of sin are only for a season. Because no matter how long it takes, your sins will find you out. Sin is a tattletale. Always remember that. He chose to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. He made a good choice. You know why? Do you suppose that if Moses hadn't have chosen to be faithful to God's people instead, that God would have said, well, I guess we can't do the whole 10 plagues thing? No, he would not have done that. He'd have used somebody else, maybe Aaron, I don't know. But somebody would have continued to do God's work. And those plagues would have been on the head of Moses, along with everybody else. Being faithful to God is always better in the long run. Play the long game, folks. Verse 26, it says, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. The reproach of Christ is the rejected part of Christ, the part that nobody wanted anything to do with, the part that made the Pharisees look at him and go, ugh. You know, the ministry of Christ looked a lot like what we're doing. Go read your gospel. How many big churches did Jesus preach out of? Not many. He would stand up in the synagogue and he would read the word of God, and there would be large crowds. And that's a fantastic thing. And I hope in these larger churches that have their own buildings, I hope that's the spirit it's being done in. But I'm sad to say, most of the time, I can tell you from personal experience, most of the time it's not. Most of the time it feels more like the Pharisees than it does Jesus. Most of the time Jesus isn't preaching from those lofty places. However, most of the time Jesus is preaching from somebody's little house. It's not always a grand house like it was with Zacchaeus, certain others. Sometimes it's just somebody's little old house on the outskirts of town. You know, Jesus is content to draw a crowd there as much as he is anywhere else. Sometimes it's by a river. Sometimes it's just out on the street. Sometimes it's out in the field somewhere. Nowhere to buy food at, so he's got to find a little lad's lunch. They get done with that, and we hear about these miracles, how great it was, the storm on the sea. You know where they go? Jesus told one of his disciples, the foxes have holes, the birds have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. They were sleeping out in the wilderness. making fires every night to cook their food on. They were homeless. They wandered from place to place. That's the reproach of Christ. You see, everybody wants to be there for the miracles. Everybody wants to be there when cool stuff is happening. Oh man, he multiplied a little lad's lunch. Wow, now there's 1,000,000 biscuits. That's so cool. Everybody wants to be there with the storm on the sea. Everybody wants to watch Jesus say, "Peace, be still." Nobody wants to be there when we're trying to keep the ship from capsizing the first 3 hours beforehand. Nobody wants to be there when the baskets need to be hauled off after the little lad's lunch. The crowd won't leave, and you're trying to get to the other side of the boat, and you think you're fixing to die all night long, and then you think you see a ghost. Nobody wants to be there for that part. That's the reproaches of Christ. And Moses saw that as greater riches than anything Egypt had to offer. The reproaches of Christ are valuable. They mean something to you. You've earned that faith. Man, I remember working those VBS nights, some of the greatest nights of my life. Up in the middle of the night, working with chicken wire and paper mache, trying to color things around. People are screaming at you because they're tired and frustrated. Poor Amanda, pregnant, trying to find somewhere to sleep or rest. And we're up there, blood, sweat, and tears, literal. All three of them, making that thing work. But you know what? Those kids showed up that first day of VBS. They didn't walk into a church. They didn't walk into a hallway. They walked into the belly of a whale. And let me tell you something. The reproaches of Christ, those are greater riches than anything Egypt or America or anywhere in the world has to offer. He had respect under the recompense of the reward. He says, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. Well, when you've got the power of the King of Kings, King of Egypt, it doesn't seem so scary anymore. He endured as seeing him who is invisible. That was the key. He's not afraid of the king. He's got God. And yes, he might make that king angry, and yes, there may be consequences, but he isn't afraid of those consequences. And he's willing to accept them when they come. Until he runs away to the backside of the... That's a whole other story, though. But this is what we're looking at. This is the Moses that shows up in Exodus 2. And I want to real quick look at that story this evening in Exodus chapter 2. In Exodus chapter 2, let me pull all the way up here. It says, there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. That's the way it works, right? Those tribes marry into each other. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him, that he was goodly, a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. That same kind of thing. A good child, a goodly child, a destiny about him. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him. She took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch. She's trying to use those things to hold it together because of what she's fixing to do. She put the child in therein. She laid it in the flags by the riverbanks. The flags, they look kind of like, what are those things called? With a sort of long brown head, and it's got the little thing sticking out of it. Yeah, like a cattail. That's kind of what it looks like. The flags by the river was like a cattail, if you know what that is. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done of him. So they let him float down the Nile River, trying to get him somewhere safer than where they were at, because with all the dangerous animals and the fear of that thing capsizing and all the dangers that could go with it, that was safer than him still being at home with mom and dad. That was the fear of the slave life. Pharaoh could say, I want to kill all of your children, and there's nothing you could do about it. Imagine living in that fear. So they send him down the river thinking that's going to be safer, and it was. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. Her maidens walked along by the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. When she'd opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept, and she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. So she knew right away what this was, and evidently did not agree with her father's decision wholeheartedly because she chose to save one of these Hebrew boys. His sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go, and the maid went and called the child's mother. Now, you might be thinking, a woman who can physically nurse this child, I wonder, must she be the mother? Obviously. I mean, she must have known this. How obvious would this have been? How could nobody put this together? Didn't have to necessarily be the mother. Remember, there's a lot of women whose children were just killed. A lot of mothers with no baby to nurse, you know. So it didn't necessarily have to be proof that this was Moses' actual mother, yet it was. Verse 8, Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go," and the maid went and called the child's mother. So that's just how it worked out. Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. Got paid to raise her own son. What an amazing thing. And the child grew. She brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses. The name Moses means drawn out, because he was drawn out of the water. Because I drew him out of the water. Verse 11, "And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, choosing rather to suffer the affliction of God's people." Right? So he's looking on his people and the slavery that's been forced upon them and how they're being mistreated because of their race, because they're Jewish people, and because they come from Joseph and they come from Israel, or Jacob as it were, that they're being treated this way. And it's never, never, never okay to treat somebody any particular way because of their race. That is never okay. And Moses looks on this and sees this unrighteous, this evil situation taking place, and he decides he's going to do something about it. He spied an Egyptian smiting in Hebrew, one of his brethren, and he looked this way and that way. Can I tell you real quick, if you got to look this way and you got to look that way before you decide to do something, don't do it. Okay? Just pump the brakes, all right? Don't do it. Looks this way, looks that way. When he saw there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Okay, when you got to check and make sure nobody's looking, just don't do the thing, okay? If you got to be like, that's a bad sign, okay? Usually that means you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. So he killed a human and hid his body, hid the corpse out in the sand somewhere where he couldn't get caught. And evidently was really, really bad at it. Because it says he went out the next day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said unto them that did the wrong, "Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow?" So in other words, he sees 2 Hebrews fighting. One guy hits the other guy, and he goes, hey, what do you think you're doing? You can't just hit this guy. And in verse 24, he said, "Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? O son of the Pharaoh's daughter." They don't call me that anymore. "Oh, so what? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedest the Egyptian?" So what, are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday, huh? You going to just start murdering everybody who disagrees with you, huh? I imagine this guy must be from Brooklyn a little bit.
See that?
You know? It feels very like Long Island, New York, maybe. That part of the world, for someone to be like, "Hey, what are you gonna do? You gonna just kill me all of a sudden because what? What? Because you don't like me, just like that Egyptian fella you killed yesterday." And Moses feared and said, "Surely the thing is known." So what does he do? It says that when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. That's the law. You kill, you get killed. That's the law. That's how we deter killing in this country. If every time you killed somebody, you took them to a special therapist's office and said, "Did your dad hug you enough?" There's going to be more killing. But if somebody thinks, if I kill, I'm going to get killed, that's what we call a deterrent, and it works. But I digress. Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So this is the second part of Moses' story that we don't necessarily have time to get into tonight, but we are going to sort of skip right through it. Suffice it to say, he comes to this well and he sees the women trying to feed their father's sheep, and these big strong shepherds come by and they start grabbing the women by the hair and throwing them to the ground and just picking them up and tossing them around and just being really rough and mean to these girls and taking the water by force. And so Moses stands up and he goes, no, that's not how this works, and literally beats the tar out of these shepherds in Midian. And protects these women from these people. Dad's like, hey, that's great. Thank you. You want a reward? Here's a human. You want a daughter? I've got plenty of them. Which is a little bit like, that's not quite how humans should be treated, but God deals with that. It's in Deuteronomy. We don't have time tonight. And he marries a woman there. They have a fantastic life together. He has a son. He calls his name Gershom, which means stranger. You imagine carrying the name of strange with you everywhere you went.
It's annoying. It's very, very annoying.
Yeah. Anyway. It is after he's lived this life. He's 40 when he moves to Midian. And he's lived another 40 years after that when he sees a bush burning but not consumed. And his destiny begins at the age of 80 years old. And that is our lesson for this evening. But I want you guys to remember, I don't have my mouse. And also, that life may not tick up the way you thought it was going to, but at the end of the day, God's plan is always better. Choose to suffer the affliction of God's people rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, and everything is going to work out according to his plan, which is always better than yours. You just got to keep trusting him. That's our lesson for this evening. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, for all the support in the comment section. I do see you guys, and I appreciate it. This Sunday is going to be Anniversary Sunday. Looking forward to it. We have a little small business meeting we have to have at least once a year. This is our once a year business meeting. We're going to do that, have Sunday school, and then get right into the festivities. Look forward to seeing you guys then. So until then, guys, we'll see you later. Bye. All right, YouTube, it's going to take me just a second to figure out how to get to the stop streaming button because I can't see my mouse. Okay, I'm on stop recording. I think that's auto stop. Stop streaming. I'm going to click this, but then I also have to click yes, and that's going to take me a minute too. So